Hello, this is the guy that does the podcast.
Stop it. This song has been just so inspiring. Where's the love, y'all? Where is it? So over the weekend, I had a learning lesson, and there's a coffee shop down the street, and it was dog friendly. And I brought my dog. I said, what the hell? Let's get a cup of coffee, be with the dogs. And although my dogs were very well behaved and minding their P's and Q's, it was very tight, and other dogs in the restaurant just had no training. So I was constantly like dodging and avoiding these untrained dogs, and it got me thinking, just because a place is dog friendly doesn't mean you have to bring your dog. No matter how trained they are, there's some scenarios where you just deserve to relax and enjoy your day without worrying about what other people might do, what other dogs might come up to you, and constantly like telling people, no, you cannot pet my dog. So although it's fun in retrospect, every now and then I'll do it, it's not something that I put into my routine, and it doesn't determine my success. So not bringing my dog everywhere with me is a good thing, not only for them, but for my sanity as well.
What would you say is a red flag when you're at those places of when you should leave?
I'm being very observant. I'm looking around me, and if other people seemingly have no control, or their dogs are on a longer lead or flexi leash, and dogs are just dragging them everywhere, it's a free-for-all, it's like a dog park, I will definitely not be enjoying that, nor putting my dogs in a position where they might become startled or hurt or God knows what. So I'll look for, do people have any control over their dogs? And 99.9% of people don't. If I were to take my dog somewhere dog friendly in the future, I might scope it out before I go in with my dog and see what the setup is, I have an ability to create a little distance, whether that's at a further table in the back. I see how close things are together and kind of the configuration. It's pretty unpredictable because you never know who's going to be there. But creating distance if you are going to take your dog to a dog-friendly place is probably my number one advice. And if it's packed in there, maybe I'd skip that place and go to another place. Another thing that I would look for when entering somewhere I'm going with my dog is if the other dogs are off leash. And if the other dogs around are off leash, there's no way I'm going in, because I just do not feel safe, and I'm not going to put my dog in a position where an off-leash dog can approach them, even if they are rock solid in their commands.
Would you say that places can differ for where you would like to take your dog, depending on if you're training versus just going to enjoy it?
Yes. So if I'm going to enjoy something, I'll take my dogs to a park, because I really feel like walking and sniffing and being out in public is really good for them, and that's what they really enjoy, as opposed to if I want to do something like work around distractions, I will take my dogs to a coffee shop or a patio that is safe and I feel confident in, and have them practice holding it down in a little bit of more chaos going on around them, and I found that really helpful. But you just want to be safe when you're going out and about and doing things like that. So in conclusion, guys, your dog does not have to go everywhere with you, and although the idea of taking your dog to a patio to have a beer is really cool, sometimes it's a headache because there's just so many different variables that could come up. And I find when I take my dogs places, I don't enjoy myself as much if I went without them. So it's not really high on my priority list to do that often, but every now and then it is a little fun to go and take them somewhere dog friendly and just kind of explore new places with them. Just needs to have some boundaries. No. No. Good. Good. Yeah. Good job, pup. Max, good girl. Good girl. In a group of dogs one day. Yeah. Good. Good girl. Bed. Good. You're good. Yeah. Good. Okay. Good job. Wow. Bed. Good. Good. Okay. Come on, Maxie. Come on, Maxie. Good job. What's up, guys? It's Bridget with Miracle Canine Training. I just had a really interesting session with a Great Dane puppy, and the dog is coming to us to work through some separation anxiety that the owner is experiencing at home. Sometimes she feels like she can't leave the dog alone without a big freak out, and she mentioned to me that she started crating the dog but stopped because she didn't feel like the dog liked the crate. So a lot to unpack there. First, I think when we're dealing with separation anxiety, it's really essential that our dogs are able to be without us. And we can start working on that separation by implementing a crate. And a crate's not always going to be the happiest place in the world for your dog, but it should be over time represent calmness, represent a place that your dog can go and relax and not have to be attached to you throughout the house. So if you're seeing issues with your dog, such as following you from room to room, or getting nervous if you step out of the house for a moment, or even starting to see some destructive behaviors when you're gone, whether that's chewing things, destroying items in your house, or ingesting things that they shouldn't get, I would definitely consider crating your dog. And as we're moving forward with that process, we can take the time to properly condition a crate. So it's not only associated with us shoving the dog in there and leaving. We can begin to strengthen the dog's relationship with us by providing that separation. So one of the best ways you can work through separation anxiety is to give your dog some time away from you. In a perfect world, we'd be able to take our dogs everywhere with us, but unfortunately, creating a dog that always has to be with you is not a healthy mindset for your dog. As you could see, the Great Dane puppy was extremely nervous and nothing was happening. The owner was literally about 10 feet away, and this dog was incapable of interacting with me or being engaged with me because all she could think about was getting back to the owner. So it was a rough first session, nothing we haven't seen before, nothing that we can't work toward, but we sent the owner home with some homework, back in the crate obviously. Creating when you're home is an essential part of the process because we can begin to see, is my dog scratching the crate? Is my dog biting at the crate? Is my dog chewing something in the crate? And we can begin to correct some of those behaviors if we have a means to correct our dog, and we can start having them feel a little bit better about being alone. Another great topic we wanted to elaborate on is kind of over communicating with your dog, which we see a lot of clients start out with just speaking too much to their dog. And an example of that is if little Ollie over here is on a bed and I'm like, hey buddy, when you get off the bed stay, you're gonna get a big treat. If you just stay there and stop whining, you're gonna get something really good. And obviously Ollie has no idea what I'm saying to him. He can maybe take bits and pieces of hearing words he's familiar with, like down and bed, but over communicating with him is gonna have him want to whine a little bit more, want my attention a little bit more, and the more eye contact I'm making, the more I'm speaking to him, we can see the whining is picking up there a little bit as opposed to just ignoring him and only saying what I know he can understand. This doesn't mean that we have to be stone cold with our dogs, but in your relationship with your dog, I would consider, as you're leaving your house or coming back home or in the training process, that we're only saying what matters. So instead of being like, oh, bye baby, I'll see you later, I love you so much, just leave the house in silence and have your dog be prepared to be without you, without all of this smothering or over affection or over speaking to your dog, because it can really affect your training in some areas. So there is an importance in keeping a lot of the relationship with your dog neutral. So don't underestimate the power of neutrality, where I don't need to be shouting at my dog if they're doing something wrong, and I don't need to be overexcitingly screaming at the top of my lungs when they're doing something good. I feel like over communicating with your dog just over time will have them tune you out, and those really important things that we're asking them to do just kind of go over their head. So take some time and realize that dogs perceive our voices or us talking to them, eye contact, as attention. And if we're working through big issues like separation anxiety or an anxious dog, I don't want to sit there and be like, you're such a good boy, I love you so much, you're doing so great, because that's only going to be perceived by the dog as, oh my God, she's talking to me, this is great, I love this. And we can start to see him become a little bit more anxious with the more attention we give him, rather than taking a neutral path where I'm not going to talk to him, I'm not going to look at him. I've asked him to go on his bed and I've asked him to lay down, and I will enforce those as I need to. So we can really key and focus on the things that are important to us and help our dog and us have a better relationship overall.
Chicago area she wants to talk to. That's all I know.
Hello, this is the guy that does the podcast.
Stop it.
What can we do at my facility to help push back against this? I mean, because we just kind of stay in our own lane.
Sure.
And I know a service dog trainer rents one of my buildings, and
Yep.
she's got, her specialty is a facility therapy dog,
Yeah,
and I raise labs for her.
yeah,
And all of her dogs wear prong collars and e-collars
Yep.
in the schools, and
Yep.
she won't work with anyone that doesn't use
Yeah.
them because they're just such great tools.
yeah.
The schools have no problem with them.
100%.
I mean, they're
Yeah.
aghast that anybody would want to be taking them away from them. So what can we do to help fight back?
That is a great question, and actually my most recent podcast episode I did the other day was kind of tied into that with all the stuff going on in the UK right now. I think the biggest thing is that we need to be a lot louder about what we're doing and how it's helping. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, like you were mentioning, like service dog training is a great example, right? Because there's a lot of, the loud minority of force-free trainers that are like, oh, service dogs, it's all positive, it's this, it's that. I know a lot of the largest service dog organizations in the country that utilize aversives very heavily because of the sheer fact that these dogs are working with disabled handlers in a lot of cases that can't have these dogs acting out, right? But when you tell people that, they're shocked because they don't hear it anywhere, right? So I think a lot of people just need to be more vocal about the honesty of that stuff.
Well, we used to buy dogs from Paws with a Cause because they have a breeding program, and they're huge. They're
Yeah.
like an hour and a half north of us in Michigan.
Sure.
They are huge.
Yep.
The problem, we stopped buying from them because the internet blew up when it saw that we were buying Paws dogs.
Yep.
But here's the thing, you go to their facility, and
Yep.
it's not out front, but it's in back. All those fucking dogs have prong collars on.
I know. And that's the frustrating thing. And getting back to, what do people need to do? They need to not bend to that shit, right? Because, that's what's going to get you into trouble is by pretending you're not doing something and then actually doing it and then trying to make it seem like it's all nice and we don't do that, we don't need to do that because you're getting funding from those places. If you don't want that shit to actually go away, you can't do that. You know what I mean? So that's really it. I think people need to be much more honest about the realities of training dogs and what is really needed in order to get some of the results that you're looking for, and that's all we could do is not just sit in the background and be like, well, I'm just training dogs in my facility and I'm not going to post videos on the internet because people might give me a hard time over it, and I'm not going to talk about correcting dogs, and I'm not going to do that because then, people aren't, the general public isn't educated to hey, if I want my dog to behave in A, B, C, or D way, this is the reality of what it takes. And all this bullshit that the force-free community is saying, you know, they could say it all day long, right? But really, it's like their word against our word because nobody else is like showing their stuff and really standing behind it like that, you know? So, yeah, I think people just need to be more honest. That's it.
Have you ever found a video online for them training a difficult dog force free?
Not really. No. I mean, truthful answer, no, like no. You could go online and search all day long, like force free, you know, before and after, or like aggression rehabilitation with force free, or this or that, and it's all just talking. I mean, that's why they're building their platforms on saying, you know, well, we can do it this way. There's a better way. But they're not showing that better way. And the frustrating thing about it, I tell everybody this all the time, if the force-free approach worked as effectively and efficiently as they say it does, they would monopolize dog training, right? Nobody wants to use e-collars, right? Like, nobody wants to have to correct their dog. So if it worked as good as they're saying it's going to, people would jump on it like that.
I would love it.
Hi, Sophie. No, that is a very good question. Depends person to person. We always end there. Some people, I'll ease more into it. You know what I mean? Like if I can tell the person is a little sensitive to things in general, which generally you could tell before you even start the session. You know what I mean? Like if a person is going to be a little funny about it, I will. I'll do a lot more explaining it, explaining what they're seeing. Excuse me, stuff like that, where they seem pretty cool and just kind of got it. You know, they kind of realize their dog's a little bit of a pain in the ass, and he kind of just needs you to stay on him.
Like I noticed the partner a couple times, she was kind of like...
A little bit, yeah.
Like right at the beginning.
Yes, yep.
And then
it
was fine.
Yeah, it just depends, right? Like, I would say, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, you can't... That's the reason why he listens, is because he gets corrections. You know what I mean? And yeah, he's a little bit more, like noticeable with it. He's not as stoic with his response to it by any means. But, like, that's why he listens, you know? And I would rather just educate them on, like, hey, like, this is why it's necessary. And also, the really important thing is, after the initial nonsense with him that I needed to correct for, like the grabbing the leash shit, the breaking the bed stay initially, stuff like that, until we did the downs at the park, I didn't really need to correct him for anything. You know what I mean? A couple here and there, a couple for the come command. But I want them to see how I give a correction and then don't need to give a correction the next time. You know what I mean? That park stuff was funny, though, because it was the same shit he did to me at the park when we took him earlier, right? And that's where I told you, like, I haven't worked him that much. You know what I mean? Like, Sunny has done all of his training pretty much. So when we were at the park, I was kind of like, is he blowing me off right now? Or is he just figuring it out? You know what I mean? And that's why I was kind of being easy on him at the park, and I was working him through it consistently, but I really wasn't, like, getting on him over it that much. The second I saw him do so good with those downstays in the actual training center, and then we took him to the park, and he was being a dick about it again there, I was like, all right, you're just playing me. So, but yeah, as far as that's concerned, it depends person to person, obviously, but I really try, like, I kind of try to push the envelope in the send home a little bit, you know what I mean? I really try to, especially on nice days and stuff, like, get out, let's get around distractions, let me show you how to work through some hurdles, you know? I want to kind of, like, it's obviously not about impressing the person, but I want them to see your dog is very capable, you know what I mean? Because sometimes if we just stay in the facility and we don't really leave the facility and we work around distractions the dog is comfortable in, you know what I mean? It's like, it's cool, like, I mean, it's still impressive to the owner, but it's like, it doesn't help them a lot when they get home and they experience hurdles.
I was just curious to hear what your, not standpoint, but, because I can't think of another word, that's what I'm going to use, is on creating any dog, all dogs.
I'm team crate.
I mean, I assumed that, but so for a trainer that I've shadowed before, she will not take any dogs in for training if the owners don't crate the dog.
I understand. Because she doesn't want to have to deal with crate training the dog and the dog being stressed out with the crate, that kind of it.
But also because that's expectations she has when the dog goes home, is that they continue crating.
I understand.
Like when they can't supervise.
I get what you're saying. Right, so it's like if the owner isn't going to crate the dog, that's a necessary part of her training program.
Yeah.
So why would I take the client kind of thing?
Yeah.
I understand. I think every dog's a little different with it, you know? Like, I crate my dogs, and I'll always crate my dogs, right? A lot of our clients crate their dogs, but there are so many people that just don't have to crate their dog. You know what I mean? Like my ex-girlfriend, her dog was the kind of dog that you could leave an entire pizza on the coffee table and go to work and come back home and he wouldn't touch it. You know what I mean? Like, he never got into anything. He never had a problem being loose in the house or anything like that. So for me to, almost like what we were talking about earlier, impose my dogs should be crated on that person when there's literally no problem with it is kind of unfair, I think, you know?
Yeah.
I understand that person's stance, you know what I mean? And there are some people that I say, you have to crate your dog, right? Like, if you're having big issues when you're not home, it's not going to get solved unless you crate your dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that I'm going to give the person the benefit of the doubt of, let's figure out, do we actually, if the person is that much not wanting to crate the dog when they're not home, is there really issues we're having where that person needs to do so? And if there are really big issues, I'm not just going to tell them no, I'm going to educate them on why this is so important to the success of their dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I guess that's how I look at it. And honestly, there's some compromises you can make also. Like, some dogs will do fine just gated off in the kitchen, you know? Or we have plenty of clients who got massive fucking houses that have like an empty bedroom or something that they could just leave the dog in and it's fine, you know?
Yeah.
There's plenty of ways to confine the dog still that also don't involve a crate that some dogs will do just fine with also. So.
Yeah. That's what I struggle with, again, mentally, of...
Oh, not crating the dog?
Because I know my dogs, and
Sure.
I know if they're not supervised, they're going to eat stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. My dogs, my one dog, Vera, my Pitty, she is very mischievous, right? She's great. She's like my best dog, I would say. Like my easiest one, most social, stuff like that. But she is a mischievous dog, you know? And, you know, I get back to also, though, some of those things, I do try to, like, obviously crating is my solution for it. But I do try to work on some of those things also. Like, some people that have issues like that, you know, we could also find a healthy balance of, like, let's confine the dog for a little bit while we work through the problem. Like, my new puppy had this bad habit of, if he was loose in the living room by himself, we have this really big house plant in the corner and he'd go take a big bite out of the dirt. And it just does stupid shit like that, right? And he consistently did it for like a month, and I just, being lazy, just didn't do anything about it. And he kept rehearsing it, you know? And then finally I was like, all right, enough is enough. My wife got home. We set up one of our phones on FaceTime. We left the room and just watched him and just nailed him for getting into the plant like twice. And I don't think he has ever done it since, you know? So some of those issues we could actually look at and be like, is this something I can actually just solve?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, it's a balance. I think there's plenty of ways to help a lot of those clients if they're dead set on not crating the dog without forcing them to crate the dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just depends. I mean, there's some clients you talk to also, though, that are just, you could tell you're not going to do anything that I ask you to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, I'm not necessarily going to tell them no, but I am going to be very, very, very straightforward with them over the phone before I book them on what the expectation is if they want to achieve success.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I try to not create really like hard and fast rules like that. You know? It's funny, we do a trainers meeting once every other week where all of our trainers get together. The 5 of us all just like sit down and we have an hour to just talk about whatever, you know, anything new, different clients you might be working with, stuff like that. And the big theme of our one that we had just last week was progress over perfection. Because like our one trainer, Bridget, who you'll meet, she's here today, she's an incredible trainer, but like she can kind of second guess herself with stuff when she sees, like she has this picture in her head of what it needs to look like, which is great. Like being a perfectionist about this stuff is good, right? That helps you be better, obviously. But she'll sometimes have a hard time when her clients are really happy with where they're at with things, but she wants it to be better. It's not good enough for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know this, right?
Yeah.
Bridget.
Yeah.
Yeah. I struggle with that, sending dogs home, especially before the go home even starts. Like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Like, this dog is not going to do what I want it to do. And then the owner's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just gotta put yourself in their shoes sometimes, and it's easier said than done. We're all guilty of it, you know. Like I could sit here and be like, yeah, like it doesn't matter, or like, you know, progress over perfection stuff. But I still run into situations where I'm like, damn, that didn't go how I wanted it to go, you know. Even though the client may be very happy still, you know.
Which I guess is another like, is that normal? Which I think might be the way that you set up your go homes, which is different than the way that I do mine.
Sure.
I find myself repeating simple things over and over and over again. Like we do a
Give me an
formal-
example.
So we do like a formal sit down without the dog present first, so that they can focus on stuff that I'm telling them.
Oh, I understand. Yeah.
And so like I'll go through all the command words, I'll go through the fact that I don't use the word
Yeah.
stay, that it's implied stays.
Uh-huh.
That's probably the biggest one that I see
Okay.
is stay,
Yeah,
stay,
yeah. Uh-huh.
stay, or repeating themselves over
Yeah.
and over and over again. When I've said multiple times, and then I'll point it out when they
Yeah,
do it too. And I know that most of the time they don't even realize what they're doing,
Yes.
but I find it hard to get people to understand.
So two things, right? That's a good one also. And these are just my opinions, right?
Mhm.
But the sit down before you bring the dog in,
Mm-hmm.
it's going over their head. They're just like, when do I get to see my dog? I've been away from them for so long. They're not retaining anything that you're telling them. And even if they're trying to focus in that moment, once they see the dog and start working with the dog and are so excited to work with the dog again, they're gonna forget everything that you told them.
Yeah.
Right? So you'll notice, like, I don't say shit, and then we just start
Yeah.
working. And what I do is I strategically in my head, I go through a process of, I demo it obviously, and I don't even get really crazy with demoing it, right? I'm not like overly explaining or anything like
Yeah.
that. I'm just showing them, your dog's capable of this is what I'm doing, and then I hand them the leash, and obviously you saw, right? Like this is what you're gonna do, right? And I anticipate the mistakes they're gonna make, right?
Yeah.
So what's the number one thing that people will do the first time you go to, you have them work a command that you may have told them 20 times not to do? Repeat the command.
Yeah.
Right? They'll go bed, 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 bed. So the first thing I tell them to do, I anticipate they're gonna do that. And I say, walk up to the bed, tell them bed, and just let it breathe for a minute. Just give it a second regardless of what the dog is gonna do, right? So right off the rip, my probability, that's my only thing I'm focused on. I'm not saying do that, then do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. It's just do this first. And then they do it successfully, right? And then I'll prompt them to do the next thing. And I'll be very clear about it. And if the dog doesn't do it, tell them no, give your tap, help them, and then just give them another minute again, right? And then, all right, they did that successfully, and I broke that habit preemptively of them repeating those commands a lot, right? And then each time they work the rep, I prompt them through every motion. Pick up the leash and pause. Wait a minute, okay, now release them, right? And then I do that for the first handful of repetitions, and then I slowly start backing the prompts off. And I do this like kind of strategically in my head. I slowly back the prompts off, where I'll still give them if I need to, but it's like you're teaching a command, right? When you teach a dog a command, what do? You prompt and help every time, prompt and help every time, then you fade the lure, right? I fade the lure, right? I fade the help that I'm giving them a little bit, until I get them to a place where they're anticipating me giving them that help, and they just do it successfully on their own.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, you're literally training, it's no different than you're training your dogs, right? So what do we do to help dogs be successful and not make a ton of mistakes? We give them a lot of help initially,
Yeah.
in real time as we're doing it. So you do the same exact thing with your owners,
Yeah.
right? And then you just have to fade the help at some point.
Yeah. I like the way that you're going with structured in that you didn't tell them everything. Because I think that's part of my problem is I tell them too much right at the
Too
beginning.
much too soon, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Like I tell them too much right at the beginning, and then I try to add the dog in, and then try to back off and do little bits at a time when they're already thinking of everything.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the biggest thing, is just break it into more bite-sized pieces for them, you know? And every dog, like, I'll get some owners that come in that they still struggle with all of that, you know what I mean? Where those owners, I was able to, by the end of it, it was cool. Like, when they were working the downstays and the leash walking and stuff, I was able to just hang out, and they were doing it, and they were doing it really well and not requiring a lot of help. There are a lot of people that I still need to really kind of hold their hand through the lesson, you know? So you just then work at your owner's speed, you know?
Do they get any like reading or video material before they go home to watch or read?
No. They probably should, right? But I don't know. Yeah. We'll call it maybe being lazy or what. I think the big thing is, and this is the biggest difference between us and some other places, is we put out so much content on social media that most of our clients watch regularly that go over all of these details. They're like everyday reminders.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that really, really helps. And then Paige films so much of our stuff, and most of the stuff we're posting is the stuff from those lessons that they need to remember, you know? So they could always reference back that kind of stuff, you know? Yeah, I mean, is a handout nice and stuff like that? Sure, but every situation's also a little different. Like, I try to just coach them real time through the stuff, you know, and Well, we could definitely take a look at setting up, putting her in there and seeing if she tries to get out of it and making sure that she doesn't, so she respects those gates
It's
a little
only
bit
when
more.
nobody's looking.
Yeah.
She like pretty much.
I think she would if the kids are playing out there. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
no, I think she
confusing
might
for her,
also,
like,
yeah.
I'm allowed to be out there playing. Why, you know?
Well, we just want her to be respectful of like when those gates are closed,
Yeah.
she's got to stay inside,
Exactly.
you know?
That's what we're trying to teach.
So we could work on that for sure.
We
That's
got
the
the
one-
5 cow. You probably saw.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Which was cool.
Yeah, that's a good call.
And then
She's just romping around.
she's showing up.
She's just loving
And then
it. Now, is she getting out? Is she jumping on that little wall right there? Is that how she's getting out?
And we put a couple of things there, but I guess she must jump around
Yeah,
those.
she's a
'cause
jump-
so
She's a
good.
smart cookie. Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's start with some stuff in the area here. So if you want, why don't you go ahead and call her into there, and then we'll close her off in there, and we'll just kind of see what she does to start here. So we'll see what we get. We'll start with just having her closed in there, obviously. We'll see if she tries to get out at all. And the things that I'll set the boundary for is 1, if she goes up onto that wall at all, I'll correct for that. And then 2, obviously, you mentioned the furniture. If she tries to jump up on there, obviously, we'll do that also. No. So when you look at stuff like this where you want to leave a true lasting inhibition of her not doing those things, it's got to be motivating enough, right? Because you'll find yourself, if she's just nagging, you're nagging her over getting onto that thing, you know, once you're not there to nag her anymore, obviously she's going to try to do it still. Very good. Sitting there patiently. So now that they're inside, we're going to kind of go around the corner here, and we'll see, obviously, if she tries to get up or anything.
All right, I'll turn it off, honey.
And you should see if you can catch that a couple of times and correct it like that, like nice and high, you'll see that it'll go away very quickly. The goal with any of the corrections that we're giving that I always tell everybody is that you don't have to do it the next time, right? So any of those things, like listen, if she were, you know, for your come commands and stuff like that, if you want to use the vibrate to enforce that, I don't have an issue with that, obviously, as long as she's listening to it, right? But it sounds like you've caught it a decent amount of times and you've tried correcting so far, and she's just continuously making that mistake, right? So it's no different than like if you guys had an electric fence, right? She would learn 1 or 2 times that if she tried to go through it, that it would be a really motivating correction for that, obviously, and then she would stop doing it, you know? And then once she's doing well, like obviously she's just sitting in there nice and patiently herself now. Come on, let's go. Then she can come out and hang out. Oh. There you go. Then you hang out with her for a minute, pet her up, let her realize that nobody's mad at her or anything.
The couple times, like when I saw her, like with her paws
Yep.
up on her, getting ready to go, a hard no, and she'll back off.
In the moment, right?
At that particular
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you could find yourself in this trap of like interrupting them. It's like, you know, I mean, using a child example, right? If every time your kid was about to make the mistake, you're like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. They're going to continue to push the boundary until they hear the don't do that. You know what I mean? But nothing about that will teach them to not do that then the next time, right? So there's a big difference between interrupting something and inhibiting something, right? And we look at something like, say, jumping, right? Or the nipping. You brought up the nipping a couple times, right? The nipping at the heels. If we can correct that nice and firm 1 or 2 times, as opposed to just every time she does it, hey, stop doing that, hey, stop doing that, same deal. You'll see it actually totally go away, right? Where she just won't do it anymore. And then everybody gets to live happily because there's not all this frustration of, God, she's going to come and nip my ankles in a minute, or she's going to jump over the wall or anything like that, you know?
Freaked me out 2 nights ago. Is the kids were all playing, but then my one son put his hood up on his son.
Sure. She a little reactive.
Yeah, she was like,
Sure.
I mean, she got
Yeah.
freaked me out. Like I thought she was gonna attack him.
Yeah, sure. So different pictures obviously can really throw dogs off. So if that's something she wasn't used to and it was like nighttime and the hood is up, she doesn't know who it is. If you think about it, like one of the big conversations we had last time while we were here was you guys got her obviously to want to protect the house from things like that. But it's the give and take, you know what I mean? Of like we want her to do that, but at the same time, obviously, we definitely don't want it in that context, right? Which is why I always kind of live by the mentality of generally speaking, I don't allow my dogs to rehearse any sort of like those types of behaviors. And then if a freak situation happens where like there is some random intruder on the property or something like that, they kind of will kick into that natural instinct of theirs, you know what I mean? But I generally will deter it everywhere else, right? So same deal, at the first sign, like that was the first time you saw that obviously, the first sign of anything like that, I just squash that stuff, right? I make sure I correct it nice and firm right there and then. That way she realizes, okay, I tried it one time, it definitely didn't work, so I'm definitely not gonna try it again, right? Exact same concept as with the fence, right, or with the nipping and stuff like that. And these are all non-obedience related things, like just behavioral issues that you want to see actually go away. You've just got to make sure you're motivating enough about the consequences for it. So, so you said sometimes she's a little resistant about getting into the crate, you said?
Yeah, she had. Is she for you? I feel like you put her in there more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to tell her like last night,
Yeah.
like I had to keep telling her. I mean, she did it after like 30 seconds. But
Sure.
Ideally, she does it after
one time. Yeah.
Bingo.
Come on.
Come.
It's okay.
Well, we don't want her just
Yeah.
to you.
Yep.
Bingo, come.
So is this kind of normal, what you'll see here?
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
She knows.
Bingo, come. Come.
There we go.
In your bed.
So I want you to go ahead and grab the leash here. And I want you to do that a few times. So just give one command for it. Don't repeat it or anything. If she doesn't do it, just use your leash to help her in at that point.
Bingo, bed.
And then walk her right over and use that leash to get her on in. Excellent. And then you can go ahead and release her out, and we'll do that all again.
Bingo, bed.
Excellent.
Okay.
So sometimes if you're having a lot of issues with like,
Or should I do it?
do one more and then you guys can switch.
Bingo, bed.
So sometimes if you're having a lot of issues with like repeating commands and you're needing to break that cycle, taking away the ability for her to make the mistake initially to block that cycle, then jumping back into it off leash can be really beneficial. The trap you'll find dogs get into a lot of times is if they learn that they can kind of run away from it and then go this way and then you need to go and grab them and physically put them in and stuff like that, it just almost reinforces that state of fighting it. You know what I mean? So because we made it non-optional, right? After that first bed command, we're just getting you into the crate then at that point. Now that's why she's getting in so smoothly at this point. So now let's do this. Why don't you go ahead and release her out and then take the leash off of her.
Okay.
So in a second here, you're gonna do the same thing now. You're gonna walk up to the crate. You're gonna give your bed command. Give her a second to do it. You're still not gonna repeat the command. If she doesn't do it, you're just gonna mark with no for that.
All right. Bingo. Bed.
And then give her a second. Beautiful.
Good girl. Good girl. Okay.
And then just do that a couple of times.
Bed.
Beautiful.
Good.
You see how we shifted that attention onto you right now, so she's no longer fixated on you at this point. She knows you're the one in charge.
Okay.
Excellent. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna have her actually hold that position. So you're gonna walk her up, you'll tell her bed. Once she gets into it, just leave her in there for a minute. You can go ahead and kind of walk away.
Bingo. Bed.
Excellent.
Good girl.
And then just leave her there. And you can go ahead and walk away. And if she were to get out at this point, don't tell her bed again. Obviously mark with no to identify the incorrect choice, and then you'll take her back to the crate. A lot of times kind of slowing down the commands that we're giving is really important as well, right? Sometimes we can kind of find ourselves in that trap where it's like when you were trying to get her in initially, you're repeating her name a lot, then repeating the bed command a lot, then, switching between bed and come and this and that. And it could just get confusing for them. They're hearing so much information and none of it is really being enforced or meaning anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. So give that one command and then just follow through with the enforcing of that command if she doesn't do it then at that point. Very good. And then go ahead and release her out.
Okay, come on. Good
Beautiful.
girl.
Look at that.
How long can we expect her to stay in there with like?
As long as you're in a position to enforce it for, right? So I told you guys, like when she was at the facility, she would do an hour easily, but during the course of that hour, anytime she were to get out of position, we would correct her and put her back, right? So if you're finding yourself in a trap a lot of times of putting her in command and then getting distracted and doing something else and then turning around and then it's like 10 minutes later and it's like bingo's farting off over there somewhere, obviously she's gonna learn that, well, when they're not paying attention anymore, I could break command and go off,
So what do you do in that instance?
Well, you would still correct her and take her back ideally, right? But what I would do is, in situations where I'm prepared to address it, I would set up that exact same picture. So let's say we want her to be able to hold this while you're, I don't know, splitting wood, doing whatever, something over there, right? I would put her in position with like a training session in my mind and go over and pretend to do that thing. Is there a situation where you would really like for her to be able to hold a long downstay or bed stay, like while you're doing something that you could think of?
Or we're cooking dinner, or we're doing stuff
So
in the
this
house.
is the only crated one we have. The other ones are just open beds. But yeah, definitely there. We just kind of always check.
Sure.
Good, she's still there. Like,
And is that situation, are you trying to get her to do the bed in that situation so she doesn't jump out of the area?
yeah.
Is it that you care that she's on the bed, or just that she doesn't get out of the enclosed area?
And not on the couch. That's true. As long as she's not on the
Yep.
furniture and doesn't escape the area.
Yep.
We don't care if she's just sitting there.
Yeah, sometimes it's because
Yeah.
we just gave her breakfast and we want her
Sure.
to stay in that area.
I understand.
Use the bathroom.
100%. Yeah. So I would say it's probably an easier criteria for you to hold her to of just stay in the area and don't get on the couch than you have to hold the bed the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a way stricter criteria when really what we care about is much more broad, you know? So I would focus on that a little bit more, you know? And I would really try, like I understand, you know, like obviously we don't want to feel like we're like hurting our dogs or anything like that. I totally understand. But two things. One, even at high levels on this, you're not actually going to hurt her over it, right? Like she rebounds just fine from that. And clearly 2 seconds after we let her out of that gate, she's back to getting belly rubs and being okay with it. But I would rather you just get that under control. So she said, because I could tell that's a point of frustration is, God, like she's getting out and just going all over the yard, right? So let's just get that one thing under control with that. You know, and even if that's the one place over the next couple of weeks that you get really firm on her, and everywhere else it's like we're going to loosen up on stuff and not have it be a big deal, you're going to notice the biggest benefit from getting on that one thing. All right, so in a second I'm going to have you go about doing this process. Now just make sure as you do it, don't repeat your command or anything, so just slow yourself down with it a little bit, and make sure if she doesn't do it, you're going to tell her no for that.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect. Beautiful. Much better that time. But that's the important thing. Give her a minute to do it. If she didn't do it at that point, we would have said no for that and given a correction for it. She's like, do I have to stay in here? All right, why don't you go and release her out?
Bingo. Okay.
Beautiful.
Girl.
All right, so we'll let her hang out for a second, and then I'm going to have you do this next.
Bingo, come.
Same deal. Give her a second. Let's see if she does it. Excellent. That was much, much better. So again, just reiterating this process in case you run into an issue with this again. If you do start getting into a place where she's really resisting getting in the crate, do just a couple reps with the leash just to kind of break that cycle, then fade the leash out in just one command and make sure you correct if she doesn't do it. And then we'll always enforce then the command with, in that case, the leash, or if she's not on the leash, the e-collar then. Oh yeah? It's pretty good.
Yeah, she's just chilling.
Kate is maybe the same as me. Like, I think she was wanting to do a lot more like rewards versus correction.
Yeah.
So we'll just tell her what we talked about. And
Well, the rewards are still definitely important, right? Keep using them, you know? I absolutely want to let her know when she's doing a good job, right? But if you're starting to notice places where when those rewards aren't present, where she's just blowing you off like that, you obviously got to make sure we balance it out with the accountability. You know? And if you do run into a situation where, like, let's say you do need to get on her over something, whether it's jumping on the wall or not getting in the crate or something, and you need to be a little bit more firm on that correction, you could counteract that with a lot of rewards after. You know? Not that she necessarily needs it, but it helps us feel a little bit better sometimes. You know?
that's true.
You mean give her a reward after you corrected it?
No. Like let's say like the crate, for example, right? Let's say she was blowing you off and you needed to correct her for that, right? And you needed to correct her and she didn't like the correction or whatever, right? Then you could do like 3 or 4 repetitions that she'll do successfully because she got corrected, and we could reinforce those successful ones.
That's good.
Right? So we're not just giving her like a freebie reward because we feel bad that we corrected her, but once that correction worked, then we could reinforce the correct behavior quite a bit after, right? And like I said, you don't necessarily have to do that, but exactly, yeah. But I think she looks pretty good, all things considered. I mean, a couple little adjustments. I think that I would work on making sure she's not jumping on the wall right now. Timing your feeding a little bit more so that you can make sure that she's not having those the accidents elsewhere that you don't want her to, obviously, and we could pattern in just going there. Being a little bit smoother about going to the crate with your corrections, obviously. And I think those couple adjustments will get you a long way. When it comes to introducing children to households with dogs, whether the dog has a history of issues or not, I generally approach it in the same type of way, right? So a lot of people will make the mistake of their mind goes to like what you asked, which is how do we introduce him to the baby, right? Meaning like how do we let him sniff? How do we let him check him out and stuff like that? Where the real thing is how do we teach the dog to not be concerned about this new thing that's going on in the house, right? So if you look at your stages of introducing your dog to a baby, I always say before we move to the actual interaction stage of things, we want to make sure that we're focused on like the environmental stage of things, meaning your routines are going to change, right? There's going to be something new in the house that's requiring quite a bit of your guys' attention. New smells, new sights, all those types of things. We want to get him to a place where he could experience all of that kind of stuff without needing to mess with it, right? So one of the worst things that I think people will do is they try to do the like, here's the baby, check this thing out, right? Because that's what we do when we give a dog a toy, or that's what we do when we give him something that we're saying, hey, this is yours now, right? Where the baby, that's the exact opposite of what we want to tell him. We're telling him, hey, this is ours, right? You don't have any need to be concerned about this right now, right? So your initial little while of it is going to be just focused on coexistence, right? And getting him adapted to your new routines, right? So one thing that I coach people through in these early stages when you're a couple weeks out from having a baby, or in your case a week out obviously, is try to predict what those routines are going to look like, right? So where are you going to be feeding the baby, right? Where's the baby's stuff going to be? Where is the baby going to be taking nap time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and start setting some boundaries for those types of things, right? So something like furniture access, for example. If you're primarily going to be hanging out with the baby on the couch, right, and that piece of furniture that he generally would be allowed to be up on, I usually recommend eliminating that privilege just altogether. So not even just when we ask him to get off, he gets off, but just not letting him get up in the first place, because that's now going to kind of become the baby spot, right? Or whatever that may be, right? You know, things like the high chairs and cribs and stuff like that are where you're going to be feeding. We want to be teaching him to essentially keep a perimeter around those things, right? So no different than you would set like an electric fence or something like that. You would keep a perimeter around that you're keeping him outside of let's say 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, something like that, where he kind of avoids that space, right? And you can teach it. You don't have to teach it with the e-collar initially, obviously. You could just have him drag a leash in the house, so that when he starts doing those things initially, you could just redirect him away from them and start with that to keep some kind of strict structure to things. And then if he persists and he's still kind of fighting those boundaries, then you would start layering in corrections to then back those things up, just like you did with the furniture stuff in the past, or the picking things up he wasn't supposed to, or all of that, right? But that's going to be a lot of your initial boundary setting that you're doing with him, you know, at least for the first. Usually I say the first like month or so is generally going to be a lot of that, as you're teaching him to adapt to those new routines. And then, as you move through the stages of obviously the baby's development, you're going to kind of see places where you need to kind of reset and take a step back. So generally I say like raising a kid, there's like 3 stages you're going to go in, right? So you have newborn stage where the baby is not mobile at all, making new noises, making new smells, all sorts of stuff like that, right? And we want to focus on a lot of control in those early stages of things and getting him to a place where he's not overly concerned about it, right? Then you have the next stage, which is the baby starting to become a little bit more mobile, so crawling, maybe starting to take its first steps, stuff like that. And that's where you really want to then reset all those boundaries. Like even if over those first couple months things were going great, I almost anticipate as the baby becomes more mobile that we're going to run into issues where the dog is experiencing new pictures and might be concerned about those things, right? Then you kind of have like the walking and talking stage of things where the baby is very mobile, the baby is starting to show a little bit of interest in the dog, stuff like that. And as you move into that stage, same concept. We take a couple of steps back. We make sure we set some boundaries on both ends of the baby not approaching the dog too much, dog not approaching the baby too much. And then generally once you're past that third stage and things, you kind of, you're kind of in the clear for the most part as far as any sort of like major concerns or issues that you might run into, But I just prep everybody, like bringing a child in the house is very weird for any dog, and it takes some time for them to adjust to it. You just have to use your training to help them adjust to it, and just proactively set boundaries for things. I think that's the most important thing.
And what about when you walk? Because that's in the house. Let's say when you walk him, you're like also strolling to the baby.
Sure. Yep. So pushing the stroller, obviously and that's something you could also start practicing now, obviously, if you have the stroller, is take him out with the stroller and just make sure that he's walking with you still, right? So however you would generally enforce your leash walking, you just want to make sure he's getting used to that, because sometimes just pushing something new or the wheels cranking and stuff like that can be a little spooky to some dogs initially. So getting them used to that so that he's not trying to, pull off or dart ahead or dart behind or anything like that, where he's going to pull you and pull the stroller. You want to start getting a roll on those things.
What I'm understanding is that they're really not going to interact with each other at all.
In the early in the early stages, I don't do much interaction. I don't think there's any reason why any dog needs to be like sniffing in the baby's carriage and like, the carrier and all those type of things. I think initially, if you focus on the coexistence side of things, once you go to allow the interactions to happen as the baby gets a little bit older, you've checked the box that he's gotten comfortable with being around it first,
So if we're like in the sofa with the baby, he's supposed to be on the floor. Do we put him in a command? What do we let him like roam around the near the sofa and just like settle in front of it? Like, what would be the best approach?
Sure.
I think like that would be the closest they would ever be.
Yeah, for sure. How reliable is, let's say, his bed stay or down stay or something like that, would you say?
Yeah. No, he will do it right away. Yeah, but he'll get off it. Like they knock on the door or something. Like there's something exciting.
Sure.
He's not very reliable. Yeah. But he reliably doesn't go into the sofa unless you tell him to.
Yeah, I understand.
Don't be to the sofa with you're there unless you tell him to.
Good. Okay.
Let's say like 99%.
Yeah, so like realistically, let's say you guys had like done like a full training program and hey, you had a great bed stay and down stay and stuff like that. Those things can help the process quite a bit, because obviously as you're up moving around, moving from point A to point B with the baby and stuff, you can kind of get him out of the way without needing to like put him away. But it's by no means an absolute requirement for those types of things, right? So let's say he has a foundational understanding of it, but like you said, like under a heavy distraction, like somebody knocking on the door or something, he won't hold it. It might be good enough where at least when you guys are just hanging out, where it's the three of you, right? You guys and the baby and him, obviously. You could enforce a bed stay and have him hold that position with a leash on or something while you're doing a lot of your day-to-day things like feeding or moving around and stuff like that, so that you're giving him a little bit more direction as you're setting some of those boundaries. That could be productive for sure.
Boundaries and stuff. Leaving a leash on him or the e-collar or both.
Yeah, I probably would do both initially, because your e-collar is going to be for enforcing any like major boundaries that you need to enforce, obviously, but your leash is going to give you the ability to, once you do give those corrections, give kind of the directional help of what you want them to do, right? So since you're setting new boundaries, like again, let's say you're trying to teach him to stay away from a high chair, hypothetically, right? You could correct for him getting too close to it, and then you could use that leash to guide him away from it then, right? So it's like correction with direction is kind of the way that we're looking at that.
Right, because I think that's something we don't do is give him a direction after we give him a correction.
And generally,
Like sit or something, but
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and generally speaking, you don't have to. Like if I'm correcting a dog for counter surfing, right? Like I could just correct for that, and the expectation is just that he stops counter surfing, obviously. But when you get into some of these more like, it's kind of like a little bit more of a nuanced correction, where we're teaching him to kind of respect a perimeter more so than like stop doing one specific thing. The direction after it is kind of important. It's kind of like, it's similar to like if you were enforcing a command. Like let's say you put him in the bed stay, right? And he broke the bed stay because somebody knocked on the door and you gave a correction for that. We would need to give him some sort of direction of what he should be doing still, because there is an expectation of him in that moment, right? So as you're doing this, again, this next week or so might be a great opportunity to start brushing up on those bed stays a little bit. Maybe get the leash and e-collar out, work on that bed stay, put him on it, and when he gets off of it, give him a correction for that, and then take him back to it. And a lot of these corrections, like where we're setting some of these new boundaries, or enforcing a bed stay or something, those ones don't need to be quite as motivating as some of those ones we were using to really inhibit that nonsense the last time we talked, Because we're kind of trying to teach him something new here. So we need to give that correlation that what he's doing is incorrect, but we don't want it to be like this horrendous thing that's happening in the moment that he desperately wants to avoid. We're just trying to let him know, hey, that was incorrect. This is what you should be doing, right?
Longer because he's waiting for the treat to come out.
Yep.
I'm thinking I would like for him to just go in immediately, like once, even if there's a distraction.
Yep.
I'm wondering because I feel like that's a really safe place.
Sure.
For me, I can walk him in there, right?
Yep.
So, how do I make that happen so that he doesn't, like, if there's distractions or something, how do I train him to go there immediately without like hesitation? Most of the time he doesn't hesitate, but again, if there's distractions, he might not want to immediately.
Of course. Yeah. No, good question. So the way we get him to go in on the first command as opposed to the third command is by enforcing it on the first command as opposed to the third command, right? So if every time when something distracting is going on, we tell him kennel or we tell him crate or whatever word you're using for it, and then he doesn't do it, and then we tell him kennel again, and then he doesn't do it, and we tell him kennel again, and then he's like, okay, fine, I'll go in. At this point, he's learning, I can go in at 3 commands, right? So same deal like we talked about with the bed command. It's not that you have to provide a crazy high motivating correction, but we do have to make sure when we give that command, if the expectation is you have to go on the first one, after that first command, if he doesn't do it, we provide some sort of consequence for not doing it, right? So we just have to make sure we enforce after the first command. And you can still reward him once he gets in, right? Because obviously the reward will help speed him up as well, but the correction for not doing it on the first command will also speed him up with it, right? So you're kind of leveraging both sides. If you do it, you get a reward. You don't do it on the first one, there's a correction for it, right? So
that whole thing about like getting them to smell the clothes from the baby, when you come from the hospital, like
yeah, I'm not a believer you need to do that, I mean, if we were going to say that the first time the baby comes into the house, we were going to be letting him sniff the baby and stuff, then yeah, I mean, I would want him to have a little bit safer of an interaction with it with something like that first, but we're not going to be doing that, right? I don't want to, like I said, give him this thing like, hey, this is yours, right? This smell, all this, this association, right? I want him just neutral to it, right? It doesn't mean anything, He could smell it and see it from afar, when you come in and he's in the kennel and, you guys walk in and have the baby and he's like, well, what the heck is that thing, He'll smell it from there, see it from there, and start getting used to it from there. But we want him to take in those smells and sights and sounds and all that stuff from just a more controlled position, which is where, your bed stay can be beneficial for that, or your crate can be beneficial for that, or things like that.
Okay. It's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those ones where obviously, you guys are doing the right thing about being proactive about the situation right now, But I don't think it'll be anything that's going to be super concerning by any means. I think he'll adapt pretty fine. And if you do get any, like hypothetically, let's say, baby comes in and he's just really apprehensive of it, and you're getting a little reactivity or something, like while he's in the kennel, he's barking at it, growling, things like that. You can address it just like you've addressed everything else, right? That's something we want to let him know. Hey, you're not allowed to do that. And as you move through those stages with things. You just take a step back again and just take your time. That's the biggest thing I tell everybody. There's no rush. I mean, obviously, you're going to have this baby for a very long time, right? It's not like he desperately needs to meet it right now.
So like, let's say we're having an argument, and he'll,
Sure.
like us having an argument.
But not like jumping and attacking us.
No, I understand. Yeah. I would say that's normal, that dogs will be kind of in tune with those types of things. I will say if his default though is when like energy, because really it's not about like fighting or this or that, it's just the energy is picking up, right? The energy is shifting, right? If you're noticing his default response to that is he kind of panics a little bit and then like goes over like, hey guys, you know, and starts bugging you with it, I would probably make sure he's not scratching at you guys for it, right? Because same deal, let's say you're holding the baby starts crying and his default is come over and climb up and start scratching, that would be problematic, obviously, right? So you want to set that boundary, obviously. And that's one of those ones too where like it sounds stupid, but you could almost kind of set that up and like pretend, again, a lot of this stuff you want to try to do before the baby comes home. You guys could pretend something like that is happening to see if he's going to do it, you know what I mean? And pick the energy up and see what he does. And if he does do that and go to scratch at you guys, you can correct him for it, obviously.
So we will just give him an e-collar correction and then...
Yeah. And you wouldn't need to give any direction post that because there's not an expectation of him. It's just don't do that thing, right? So those corrections with the direction, like we talked about, that's for setting boundaries and creating expectations. You know, you need to be actively doing this thing where when we're trying to actually inhibit those behaviors, obviously, those are the ones where you just need to correct for it and just, you know, make sure that he stops doing that thing. Yeah, and then the other thing I tell everybody too, like when it comes to babies and stuff, is, you know, and I know you guys are going to do this, but I always remind everybody, just make sure you block out some time you could spend with just him also, because obviously your whole world is going to start revolving around the baby, and we want to make sure we could still block out some time to go play with, you know, go play ball with him or go have some fun with him and stuff like that, since we are going to be setting a lot of boundaries in the house with when the baby is out. You know, that's very important through this as well.